This morning, let's return to fundamentals. Sat yogis should be fundamentalists. That word has received a bad press, but the fundamental core teachings are essential to keep uppermost in the mind and never to forget what we're here to do. So rather than beginner's mind, I think fundamental mind is a better understanding of the state that the yogi should be in. So I'm going to read from what I believe is Sri Ramana's fundamental teaching. He calls it that. He calls it Upadesa Saram, which means the essence of the teaching. Okay, so it's put in the most brief, clear, direct form possible. And this teaching has 30 verses, shlokas, if you wish. But let's go to the essence of the essence. The first 14 of them are basically how not to be a sat yogi. And he starts out by saying action won't do it. But if you believe you're the doer, then do good karma. That's better than bad karma, but that won't get you to liberation, no matter how good your karma is. It will, however, minimize the suffering of the ego, but nothing more than that. Second, he talks about mantras. Mantras will not get you there either. But if you think you're a thinker and you can't stop thinking, at least use the best mantras. And the best mantras are the mantras that declare non-duality, that declare not that God is other than I, but that my I, the real source of I, is God. And claim that, and then seek the realization of that. But you still have to go beyond the mantra to what it signifies. And then thirdly, he says pranayama won't do it either, but if you stay in the kumbhaka, between breaths, in a state of inner silence for some period, you will get a glimpse of that state of the self that is completely peaceful. But it will be a laya state, not a nasha state. Nasha means you will have destroyed the illusion completely. So then in verse 15, I think the essence is expressed. The great yogi, the maha yogi, and I assume you all want to be great yogis, so this is what it is being addressed to you who have that yearning. The great yogi whose mind is extinguished and who rests in Brahman, the Absolute, has no karma as he has attained his true nature. Okay? The great yogi is one whose mind is extinguished. So that is the fundamental task. Nothing else. The extinguishing of the ego thoughts. Not temporarily, but completely. And the resting of the consciousness in the Absolute, as the Absolute, having returned to the Absolute as your real nature. No longer identified with body, with mind, with breath, with prana, nothing. Just the extinguished consciousness without an I thought in pure Satchidananda. Okay. Then in verse 16, he deepens the understanding of what it means to have your mind extinguished. When the mind withdraws from external objects of sense, okay, you want to withdraw your interest from the sensory phenomenal plane. You don't externalize, because when you externalize, you will find that there is attachment to those objects, desire, fear, attitudes, projections, judgments, all of that. You withdraw inward. And when you do that, when you withdraw completely, not just from the sensory, but from mental objects, then you will behold the effulgent form of the self. And that is true wisdom. Okay? When there are no more objects, when subject-object duality has been overcome, and awareness is aware of itself, the effulgent form, meaning the infinite light that the self is, the infinite blissful nature of that ineffable self that is not an object, has no form, but is your awareness itself. That becomes realized. And that is what Ramana is here calling wisdom. And then he says, number 17, when the mind unceasingly investigates its own nature, it transpires that there is no such thing as mind. This is the direct path for all right? For all, he is saying. No matter what your culture, your religion, your personality, strategy, no matter what, this is for everyone. It is the unceasing investigation of the nature of your own consciousness. Your consciousness is your being. But you have to stop doing, you have to stop thinking, you have to stop objectifying in order to realize your being. The mind, he says in 18, the mind is merely thoughts, and of all thoughts, the thought I is the root. Even if it's implicit, the I thought is there within every ego mind thought, because all thoughts are about the I. What can I get out of this? What can I do? What can I think? How can I improve myself? How can I change? How can I? So I is the root. Therefore, the mind that is to be extinguished is only the I. You extinguish the I and all of the other thoughts fall away. Without an I concept, there can be no thoughts, because all thoughts are based on serving that I. Okay. So that's all you have to do. Eliminate one thought, which is the belief that there is an I. Because that belief creates a representation of the I. The I thought is not the real I. It cannot be. It's a word, a concept. Therefore, it can only represent the self. So it puts you a step away from the self to believe that you are an I. When you remove that belief, then the real I emerges. So, 19, he says, whence does this I thought arise? Seek for it within, and it then vanishes. Okay? If you seek for the I, what do I mean by I? You will realize that I have nothing to hold on to. There is no I. You might have a self-image, you might have a picture of yourself in a mirror, or somebody's attitude toward you as you define yourself as some being for the other, but that's just a fantasy. So, the entire meaning of I will disappear and dissolve when you investigate what do I mean by I, there is no meaning. It can mean nothing because it is simply awareness, and awareness has no content. Therefore, it cannot be symbolized. So you will have transcended the symbolic plane. And you can't get out of suffering until you get out of language, because language is the root of our suffering. That's what produces all the I thoughts, and all the I thoughts produce unhappiness, because the I can't get satisfaction. And therefore, the I is searching and never stops thinking, never stops wanting, because it doesn't know who it is. You let go of that, and then wisdom arises. So, now in number 20, and this may be the core of the essence of the fundamental, where the I thought vanished, okay? Where the I thought vanished, there appears by itself, I am I. An entirely different I. And this, he says, is Purnam. It's translated as the infinite, but it's the fullness, the absolute. So what does that mean, I am I? It means I am not a body, I am not a mind, I am not this or that, but that absolute I, that cannot be defined except as I and has no other, does not exist in a world of objects or of duality of any kind. That total realization of the self, that is nothing, and yet because it is nothing, it is also everything, but there is no thing because there is only awareness, but that awareness is the absolute. And there will be no doubt of it because that sense of I am I comes with the realization of Satchidananda, with bliss, of luminosity, of completeness, of perfection. This is who you are. And as he says in number 21, this is always the true import of the term I. For we do not cease to exist even in the deepest sleep where there is no waking I. So it is only when we are in deep sleep, in fact, that if you're in ego consciousness, it's the only time that you will know bliss, but you won't know it because you were ignorant of the fact that that same state is there in the waking, but it's obscured by all the I thoughts. You take away that obscuration and you have bliss while awake. So, then he says, he goes through the 5 koshas, basically, the physical body, the mind, the intellect, the prana, and the ignorance, he calls it. The Anandamaya kosha, he calls the avidya, or sushupti, because you only know it in deep sleep. And he says that these are all insentient. They are not the real. I am I is the real. But all of these sheaths, they are not. Don't focus on them. Don't focus on the mind, nor even the Vijnanamaya kosha that has the ability to at least think clearly about this, but don't identify with any of them because none of them are real. And then in 23 he says, as there is no second being to know that which is consciousness. We are that. So, Ramana is saying, again, the great yogi, the real yogi, has extinguished the mind. That is your only task. Extinguish the illusion of the ego by creating a mind that is at peace. And that peace will bring clarity, will bring meaning, real meaning, the meaning of the I am I, and action that comes from that perfect consciousness. So here he's saying your mind is extinguished, and yet he's giving teachings that clearly come from a mind, don't they? But they come from a sattvic mind that Ramana is no longer identified with. Thoughts are used to express something, but there is no identification with it. So it's not that you won't be able to think anymore when you have transcended the mind and extinguished it. No, but you will have freed the use of the mind for the self, not by the ego. The ego will no longer be able to appropriate language. And then the thoughts that come will be God's thoughts. The desire that comes will be God's will, not your own. And all the movements of the body and all of the thoughts and all of the energy will simply be the pouring out of the effulgence of the infinite absolute self. So we have one task: stop believing in the ego and extinguish it by refusing to entertain its thoughts. Enjoy the silence, rest in the absolute, keeping the attention withdrawn from objects and attachments and desires until you reach that wisdom that is the knowledge of the self, which is the being of the self. And in that you are liberated. Once the ego mind's habit of producing thoughts has been extinguished, you're liberated. You are liberated as the I am I, the unborn, uncreated, blissful absolute. And then no karma, no suffering. And the illusion of the world drops away. And all of it is revealed as divine light, divine intelligence, a dream in the mind of God that is absolutely perfect. But no otherness, no separation, and no sense of lack will remain. But bliss, fullness, purnam. This is Sat Yoga.